Okay, so for the next ones joining us for our third debate are Serge Stroobants. Serge has a military background as an officer. Um, Serge shifted careers a few years ago to manage the economics and peace operations in Brussels. He's an expert in geographical systemic risk management and is thus working with systemic risks. We also have Anne Snick. Anne, you are an expert researcher. Hi, welcome both. You're an expert researcher and one of the Flemish experts in systemic economy, systemics. Thank you so much for being with us today. Serge, welcome. It's above all a matter of loss of biodiversity and destruction of ecosystems that are supposed to be natural protection barriers for viruses, for example. So that's, for example, a very easy way to connect to issues. So now we can see that the same thinking pattern remains. So we still can keep on considering one problem separated from another. Only they're all linked, and in the following years they will be smashing us down like one wave after another, and they will not be waiting a couple of years so we can bounce back. No, I guess they will just follow each other. So when I hear we got 7 billion for the relaunch, and when I know we probably need 7 trillion, which is literally 1,000 times more, well, sometimes I feel like it's kind of a joke in some sense. So how do you think we will be able to finance all of these issues together in such a short period of time with money we don't actually really have?
Should I go first, or should I leave the floor to Anne first?
You go first.
You decide.
Okay. Thank you very much, Anne. And it's a pleasure to be with you on this panel, and thank you for inviting us, I guess, to this panel. It's a real pleasure. So first of all, I won't let me pin down on a figure, because it all depends on the objectives that you set for yourself. If the objective is to get back to the situation we were in before, and as you said, segment everything, and have a causal approach to every policy that you are developing, then 7 billion will always be enough, because it depends on the objective that you set for yourself. So now if the objective wants to meet the risks to which we are going to be exposed, or already exposed today, if the amount or the objectives we set for ourselves is to create a more resilient, equal, equitable and just society, then we might to invest a little bit more than the 7 billions that you are proposing, or even the 7 trillions that you are proposing. And at the end of my first intervention, I will tell you where you can get your 7 trillions easily. So what we do at the Institute for Economics and Peace, and maybe a few words about the Institute. So this is a think tank, a non-for-profit, measuring and quantifying peace, but also measuring the economic, social and governance benefits that come along with a more peaceful situation. This is a systemic approach to peace called positive peace, based on 8 different pillars. And so we are looking at the creation of positive feedback loops rather than the creation of consequences to an action that we try to have. So first of all, the objectives of the recovery. And I think that the objective that we set for ourselves at the Institute for Economics and Peace, and I guess the ambition that we should have, Belgium is 18th on the Global Peace Index. We are living in the most peaceful region of the world. We are living in one of the most, if not the most developed region of the world. So the ambition we set for ourselves should be a little bit higher than just go back to what we knew before, that was absolutely not responding to all the systemic risks our society is exposed to. I think what we are doing at the Institute for Economics and Peace with positive peace is measuring levels of resilience. And in different of our publications, we match this with the impact of several risks. So we have one of the publications that we started to produce last year. It's called the Ecological Threat Register. So we listed 8 different ecological threats, and we understand that the climate change is just going to reinforce and aggravate those threats. And we just compared this. We looked at the interplay with the level of resilience that we measure through positive peace. We did the same for COVID-19. So we had a publication called COVID-19 and Peace, where we looked at the level of positive peace, basically looking at the level of resilience of societies. This was on the x-axis. On the y-axis, we looked at a set of economic preconditions. Those economic preconditions were, for example, the unemployment rate, the size of the structural depth of the country. We looked at the dependence on exports within the economy. So basically, we looked at the shape and the strength of the economy, but also the flexibility of the economy to cope with an external shock like COVID-19, and of course also the economic downturn that is linked to it. Well, we came to the conclusion, for example, for Belgium, that Belgium is lucky to have quite high levels of positive peace, because the economic preconditions of Belgium were not so, I would say, amazing to put us in the top countries that will recover easily or more easily from COVID-19. We were rather in the middle to the lower side, because of economic preconditions, level of unemployment, especially the debt, the high debt that we have in Belgium, but also dependency on exports, did not really create this very positive economic environment that would very easily and very resiliently absorb external shocks. So that's the first thing that we need to know. And of course, while we were having the two axes, we were able to have kind of four groups, high on one, low on one, high on the other one, and very, very high on the other one. And you have a group of other EU countries like the Czech Republic, Lithuania, Estonia, that will recover quite quickly from the impact of COVID-19, because the economies and the levels of positive peace were very high. On a global level, you will have countries like Brazil and South Africa that will really be impacted by the economic downturn of the COVID-19 crisis, that will be hit harder for a longer period of time, and will have more difficulties to get out of there. For example, they will have a lot of difficulties to access loans, to fresh money to inject in their economies, because their rating is just going to go down. So that's the first approach. So there, Belgium was not really so strong. And I would say for my first intervention, that would be the 2 points. Which objectives do we set for ourselves? And I guess depending on the objectives, the amount can vary. You can have a variation from 7 billion to 7 trillion. That's pretty clear. And secondly, how strong were we before the shock? And if I look back and in the pre-discussion that I had with Anne preparing this debate, I was just referring to the two external shocks that we experienced in the past 5 years, which would be the terrorist attacks and the COVID-19 pandemic. And my conclusion was already, well, we were not prepared, we were not that strong, and we had difficulties to respond to it. And Anne even opened the time window to the economic crisis of 2007, 2008. What we need to understand is that the economic crisis that we are facing today is the biggest one of the recent history, and recent history will be 120 years. Because, and I think this is where the systemic comes in also, we cannot apply the tricks that we applied for the other economic crises. That would be, this magical turn on the interest rates wheel. Because the interest rates were already super low at the moment when COVID-19 hit our economies and hit our societies. So this is, this magic wheel of the interest rates. We are not going to be able to use this. So the only solution that the governments have found worldwide to cope with the economic downturn and to cope with the effects of the pandemic on our economies was to inject massively money into the system. And as you said, where does the money come from, and who is going to pay for it? I think that's a question that we should ask ourselves even before we are setting the objectives for the recovery. And then clearly, we were not ready to absorb the shock anyhow. And just to tell you where you can find the 7 trillion, well, in the Global Peace Index every year, we produce an estimation of the cost of violence. And this is estimated for about $15 trillion annually. And this estimation is very, very conservative. 75 to 80% of this 15 trillion is investment in violence containment. So military expenditure for more than 40%, and investment in internal safety and security, so in police forces for more than 30%. And of course, you still have a small percentage on private security and military companies. So 75% of 15 trillion is what we invest in violence containment. And here comes, and I'm going to shut up, Anne, because I will leave you the floor. Here comes the systemic approach. If you create a society that is just and equal, people will develop less grievances. You will be able to address those grievances with less violence. You can mediate, you can find solutions through discussion. All the money that you do not invest in violence, you can reinvest in positive peace, and you can create a virtuous circle and a positive feedback loop that is going to create a more peaceful society where the levels of well-being and the levels of happiness are higher, but where you will also take the economic, social, and governance benefits. You will even develop your ecological resilience when your levels of positive peace are going up. Just the last figure, 1% increase in positive peace equals 3% increase in GDP. This is usually the time where decision makers and policy makers start to listen to me, because I bring the financial argument to the table. I'm going to shut up there at the moment.
Can you just repeat that figure, because I lost the track. No, I didn't write it down.
No, it's 1% increase in positive peace gives you 3% increase in your GDP.
Okay.
So it means you can invest in something else that your economy and still get economic benefits from it. Mm-hmm. That's it for now. I said more than enough.
Thank you. And do you have something to add?
Do I have something to add? Yes, of course.
Yeah, would you like to bounce back? Would you like to?
I'm very happy with Serge's analysis. I'm not an economist or a financial specialist myself. I have a background in education, so my question is always like, what do we mean that something is good for human development or for emancipation or progress? What do we mean by that? And all I can say, and we all know that, is that for the last couple of the last 2 centuries, let's say, and especially since the Second World War, we have identified, progress with economic growth. And that has to do in itself with a kind of financial system that we have now. I've done quite some investigations into historical financial systems, and finance is an agreement in a community to use something as a means to facilitate transactions, to keep track of transactions or to store value. And what we see with the current money system, which is created by banks, it's brought into circulation by banks, and banks are private companies that have a private interest. The money design, the money is scarce by design. It is created in the form of debt. The bank gives you a credit and then you can start doing business with that, but you have to pay it back with an interest. And whereas the banks, are allowed to create money, just by putting digits on an account, other economic actors don't have that power. So we need to pay back. That means that all the money is created as a debt, or most of it is created as a debt, which we have to pay back with an interest. That means there's always less money in circulation than we collectively owe the banks. That is a design error, because what it means is that you're gonna have to make money, not like the banks, by having the power to create it ex nihilo, but by getting it from your economic transactions, by exploiting people, exploiting planet. You need to have a positive trade balance. Wait a minute, if all the countries in the world depend on a positive trade balance, how on earth is it possible? Well, we export to Mars, or that is just a systemic error in the money system. So you see what to make money becomes the goal, GDP growth becomes the goal, and people and planet become the means for economic growth. So we have a perfect means-ends reversal, a total dysfunctional economy. The economy is a function at the service of people and planet. Now, people and planet are now at the service, even the education system, it's at the service of this capitalist, pursuing capital of the economy that has become a runaway system, a runaway, on its own tracks and very hard to. So now we have we have the collapse is coming close, and I would say COVID is just a time, the terrorist attacks and COVID it's a tiny gentle little finger exercise. the whole economy is stopping. We say, wow, finally, less pollution. We rediscover the value of local well-being, etc., etc. And then what we see, well, quickly we need to restart, the engine of the growth machinery. So we shall put in 7 billion or trillion or whatever this is. That enough? So what we're doing actually is we're again trying to solve the problem that was created by the money system by using more of the money system. So I know I'm quite radical. I'm looking from the outside, but systemically, this is what you see. This is what is happening. It's like trying to put out the fire with a torch.
So we'll jump into the debate immediately. So the question we have here is how much money will we need? How much money will we really need for the post-COVID or post-whatever world we would like to create, actually? So right now, the relaunch for Belgium is 7 billion. Now, sometimes I have the feeling that politicians have this tendency to segment the issues and see them all as one and not as interconnected issues. So we have seen it with COVID. COVID was, for example, a health issue, which is the case. It's a matter of health.
And then the fourth category of problems is the chaotic problems. It's like, well, call it, an eruption of a volcano, an earthquake, a pandemic. And in such a situation, the first thing that you need to do is restore order. Order is the first category. This is how we'll organize things, and we know it's just a temporary, we just suspend the laws, we have quarantine, people are not, all the laws are suspended. We need order. Everybody's obliged to do this and that, not much discussion. But of course, this is not a model for the new economy. The model for the new economy, on the other hand, is also not complicated. If we tweak a little bit the wheels of the financial machinery, like Serge was saying, give a tweak here on the inflation or the interest ratios, we can steer the machinery. We know by now that this is not possible. I don't have the numbers by heart, but I think in the last 70 years, there have been over 400 financial or monetary crises or bank crises altogether, because the money system is designed in an unstable way, systemically unstable way. So, and this is a monoculture. We have only one money system that we solve all our problems with worldwide. Well, we have dollars and yens and etc., but they're all interconnected and interchangeable. So it's basically a monoculture, which means that more and more domains of life are being monetized. Even education is now become a business. Your input, your throughput of your students and your measurement of your performance. Jesus, what are we doing? So the resilience then is that we, instead of having a monoculture, we all know that monoculture are very unsustainable. One crisis and your whole system collapses. This is what we saw in 2008. The alternative is to have an ecosystem, which means you have different ways to facilitate transactions for the well-being, for your goals, which is now, the well-being of the people within a thriving planet. Mm-hmm. Interesting thing is that we see this emerging everywhere. Like you have the systemic economy emerging, and regenerative economy is emerging. There's also a growing reflection on how can we make the financial system more sustainable, which means more diverse and more able to absorb shocks. And if one pathway is blocked, then we have other pathways to take over the essential functions. And so the question, as it was asked to us as panelists, like, is 7 trillion enough? Well, that is already framing the question in a way that I would like to call into question. Maybe it's enough, maybe it's too much, maybe it's not enough. The question is not how much money do we need, but what kind of economic transactions do we need? And there I join Serge. If we can organize our society in such a way that we collaborate and cooperate, and rather than compete with each other, because it's a competition that, excludes people and then makes people aggressive and they're desperate and it's getting harsher and harsher. And then we put more money into keeping the peace. Well, it would be, systemically speaking, would make much more sense to not first, make everybody compete with each other and make money from guns and make money from, from medicine or from, all the problems that we create. But and if we achieve that, if we say, how can we organize ourselves collectively? Does everybody need to have a car, or would it be better to have collective cars or public transport? How can we organize ourselves in the commons? Then, employment is again something like employment means people are employed, and employing, emploi, it means to use people. We use people for what? For making money. So employment, of course, it's also a long-term relationship between people to make sure that somebody who has manual labor or whatever labor, that they have a sort of a guarantee, that a continuity, that they will be able to work and have an income. But given the money system, you will see that the job disappears to the low wage countries, or that robotization takes over. I mean, employment is not a goal. So employment is just a means. And if you can cut the costs of employment, why would you not? So that's why instead of employment, we should start talking about work. What kind of work do we need to the society thrive again? And doing things in your neighborhood, share, helping your neighbor to whatever, to fix something in the house is an economic function. It's an allocation of resources to the needs of your community, and it doesn't require your neighbor to have a higher purchasing power to fight for jobs. The resources are there. I mean, our society is so full, so full and rich of resources that we don't even use. If we would start by saying, well, with everything we have, how can we organize ourselves? And I know that since the economy, the companies are in the grip of the financial system, they are desperate for us to consume more and more and more. So that's why we also need to tackle that in the first place. How can we ensure that a company can continue to function, can stay in business without having to force people and planet to extract more money from it? And then I think examples like community-supported agriculture, or even the fire squad. I mean, the fire squad has an economic function. It's the allocation of resources like water and engines and manpower and intelligence to a societal need of fire security. But we usually don't evaluate them by economic standards. Have they been productive? Because in that case, it would be in the interest of the fire squad to have flagrations everywhere. And it's exactly, interestingly, to join Serge, it's exactly what happened with the jail system, the incarceration system in the United States. They privatized it, and then it became in the interest of the economy to have a lot of crime, because the beds had to be full, and you saw a steep increase of recidivism. So it's the economy, the financial system that requires a jail to make money to stay in business, because we don't want to lose the jails right away. They might be useful for something. Well, maybe just, even if it's just the buildings and use them for festivals, I don't care what it is, or for retreats. But, you want to have those services, but the services should be at the service of the society if you need them. But the less you need them, the better you are. Yet we have a financial economic system that says, less is going bankrupt. You have to grow. You have to produce more and more and more. So my approach would be like, how much innovation, how much financial innovation do we need? What kind of transactions do we need? How can we facilitate those transactions? How can we organize ourselves that those needs are met in peace and cooperation? And then all of a sudden we won't need 7 trillion anymore. Maybe we'll say, well, with what we have, we can make do. And then, you can still have, everybody who contributes to the well-being of the community. Look at the community currencies. They can get something in return that gives them access to whatever, to culture, to sports, to public transportation, to education. So you don't have to go, via the in-between. What we do now is we first make money in this extractive money system by exploiting people and nature. It creates a lot of externalities. And then we take a percentage of that money to heal, to repair the externalities. That's what we're doing. But that is, again, it's like putting out the fire with the torch. If you want to have more healthcare or more education, you're first going to have to do more extraction and competition and killing the planet, which, it's like a dog trying to chase his own tail. Let's just get rid of that money system and move again to a money system that is at the service of the economic function and not, is a means for those economic goals.
Thank you very much. We have 1 minute left, maybe, so we can close. Is there something you would like to add, Serge, or to maybe bounce back on what has been said? And we have one more question if you don't have anything to add.
Yeah, I always have something to add. I think what we need to look at is a systemic approach. Look at the economic model that we are still living in. This is an economic model that has been installed after the Second World War, when 2.5 billion people were living on the face of the earth. We are now 75 years later, almost 80 years later, close to 7 billion people. We see the resources decreasing. Only 16% of the land mass can be used for agriculture. We have consumed 60% of our water reserves in the past 60 years, and will consume another 50% in the next 30 of what's remaining in the next 30 years. We see that natural disasters increased by 40% over the past 40 years in number and in intensity. And we also see a number of refugees throughout the world, and that's the most costly to a conflict is an IDP and a refugee. We see those numbers rocketing in the past 8 years from 40 million to 80 million. In our ecological threat register, we have an estimation of 1.2 billion people potentially being open or being forced to move by 2050. What are we going to do with those people? Where are they going to go, and which resources will they rely upon? So I think what we need to do is really have this systemic approach. We need to see COVID-19, we see all these other crises just as an input in an existing system. And we need to come back to the intent of this system. What is the intent of the system? Is this going to change the intent? Is this going to just like twist a little bit the system and then it come back to homeostasis? So basically what we knew before. Are we going to break the system? Are we going to go to another system? Are we going to really adapt? And a last point, and I think that is really, really important, is the concept of path dependency. When you think systemically, the shape of your system at the moment is just the result of the historical nudging towards the situation as it is today. So the system that we are in the moment is a consequence of what we had in the past and the evolution of that, and is clearly also going to define where we are going to nudge in the direction in which we are going to nudge ourselves into the future. So I think there are a lot of challenges, and I think the only solution to this is have the systemic approach and understand what the system is, and then apply concepts that are quantifiable and measurable. But, and I think this is where it's going to be the most difficult part for our political class, is to set clear objectives for our society and also a clear path to reach these objectives. Thank you from my side.
Thank you very much. We're just on time. Thank you very much for your input and to this summit. Merci. Have a nice end of the afternoon. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye bye.
Thank you. Bye bye.